Hello and welcome into the latest edition of ESPN FC. Kay Murray, Ali Moreno and Stevie Nicol here in the studio, and we will start the show by talking about the 2024 Copa America draw, which took place in Miami, and we now know which teams are in Group A. Argentina have Peru, Chile and Canada and Trinidad or Tobago. But it's Group C we're casting our eyes to start things off with, where the United States have been drawn with Uruguay, Panama and Bolivia as well. We'll get into Group B and Group D in just a moment, but let's start with Group C by welcoming in Hercules Gomez, who is in Columbus, ahead of a big game that we'll be talking about a little later in the show as well. Let's start with this one and what you make of this draw for the US, your former team, Herc.
Hey guys, yeah, I think it's a good group for the U.S. If you could draw it on paper, you knew you were going to get a tough opponent in that second pot. Uruguay is as tough as they come. But other than that, you look at the other teams, Bolivia, Panama, and more than anything, the way you will face them, the strength of schedule. You start out with Bolivia, and you can work your way to a Panama game, which no doubt will be difficult, but you would assume you should feel very confident about. And then all to play for that first spot against Uruguay in the last game of that group phase. So it's a favorable draw for the U.S. men's national team. Absolutely. Uruguay is a formidable opponent. You already saw what they did to Brazil and Argentina in Argentina. Will no doubt be a very difficult opponent, but if you could draw it any way where you knew you were going to play a powerhouse, so to speak, like Uruguay, who's a powerhouse in this competition, winning it so many times, that's the way you would have drawn it up. So a favorable draw for the U.S. men's national team. Best case scenario, Stevie, then, for the U.S.?
Absolutely. At the end of the day, it's about getting through the group. You've got to go one step at a time. The first step is get through the group. And to have Bolivia and Panama in your group, absolutely fantastic.
So given the fact they are already a top seed, Ali, coming into this one, they have avoided some of the other powerhouses who are top seeds as well. But you do look at that Uruguay game. Uruguay, a team that you thought should have been a top seed in this Copa America.
Well, certainly ahead of the United States and ahead of Mexico as well. Uruguay, given their level of performance, which Hercules just alluded to, they should have been a pot one, and they should be head of the group. But regardless, we'll see it on the field. And this is the beauty of it all. I was critical of the fact that the United States and Mexico were ahead of Uruguay in terms of being in pot one. Well, now Uruguay gets to play against the United States. Now, Hercules just mentioned it as well. That game may be inconsequential in that perhaps the group by then, it's already decided as to who's going through. It may just be down to whoever wins that game goes first or second in the group. But that's if things go the way that both of these teams plan it out to be, by the time they get to the game against Uruguay and the United States, it's probably all decided in that group anyways.
How deep a run can the US make, her? How deep a run should they be making in this tournament?
Well, Ali, excuse me, just mentioned it there. You're talking about potentially all being decided. You're just playing for first and second place. A lot of things can change. Right now, I think the U.S. would take their chances against playing against this Brazil today. But let's say come summer, there's a different coach. It could be a Carlo Ancelotti, and with that player pool and the type of football they can play, you want to avoid Brazil at all costs. Even though Colombia is a formidable opponent, it all depends on who you get in that crossover. That could really be the kicker for the U.S. men's national team. Listen, we talk about the bar for 2026 and what that would be playing in U.S. home soil. And many of us have mentioned a semifinal appearance as the bar, as a dream scenario for the U.S. men's national team come World Cup time. Those are European opponents you're going to face. Well, this is South American. If you ever had a chance on home soil in a Copa America, and if we use the last Copa America in 2016, the Centenario, as a sort of measuring stick, a U.S. men's national team that back in 2016, I would say, is not as strong as this U.S. men's national team, made it to a semifinal appearance against Argentina, ended up bowing out. It was a 4-0 drumming, but they made it to a semifinal appearance. That should be the bar, but it really all depends on who you get in that cross, and if it's a Brazil team that wins that group and how that Brazil team is playing. Today, I would take Brazil. Tomorrow, that's a different story. It's going to depend on who they get in that cross.
Yeah, speaking of Brazil, they are one of the favourites, obviously alongside Argentina, the defending World Cup champions heading into this tournament. As for Brazil, it's not been the best version of this side that we've seen in recent years. Obviously, this is a group that they can get out of. They're favourites in this tournament, but you do ask yourself how much further they can go, and if it is right, Ale, that they are right up there with Argentina.
They're right up there with Argentina based on history, based on past success and past players and past generations of players. Not this group. this group for Brazil has had issues, and it's just not one issue. It's a multitude of things going on the field. It's a team that is struggling to create enough opportunities. It's a team that is struggling to score goals. It's a team that is struggling to defend through the midfield, that right now have no balance in terms of what they do defensively through that midfield area. And because they cannot outplay teams and outscore teams, now they depend a lot on what they do defensively. And so guess what? They are missing some of the defensive responsibilities that Tiche brought to this team when he was the coach. Fernando Diniz has come in as the coach and he said, you know what? We're going to play with 2 midfielders and we're going to attack with 4. And 4 out-and-out strikers, 2 wingers and 2 guys down the middle. And, you know, we're not going to concern ourselves with defending through the midfield. Well, that'd be great if you had Rivaldo, Ronaldinho, Ronaldo playing up top. Well, that's not who's playing up top right now for Brazil. And so they don't command the respect nor the fear that they have from other teams. And that's why other teams have been able to go into Brazil and give them a game. And in the case of Argentina, beat Brazil. In the case of Uruguay, beat Brazil in Uruguay. In the case of Venezuela, tie against Brazil. And so these results are happening. It's not a coincidence. It is a byproduct of the fact that this team right now, as it pertains to the Brazil standard, is short on talent compared to what they have been in the past. And that's why we're getting these odds. The past tells us that Brazil should be in the final of this competition. The present of Brazil is completely different.
You would have to say, though, that all of those things that you said there absolutely are going against Brazil. And the fact that we're pretty certain there's going to be a new manager means that all of those things become null and void. You're going to get probably an Ancelotti who's just going to take one look at it, get all the pieces of the puzzle, do it a little bit different, and we'll see a completely different side. So I would put money on that the Brazil that we saw a couple of weeks ago is absolutely going to be nothing like the Brazil that we see in this competition.
And that's a good thing about Brazil, that they have time to get themselves right, because Copa America is not next week. But my point is there are a lot of things that they have to address. It isn't just one thing.
Okay, so it could change. Big difference if Ancelotti is there. When we look at Argentina, though, Herc, are we looking at a last dance scenario from them here?
Last dance in terms of Messi in the Copa America? Absolutely. This is Argentina right now, and still the defending not only world champions, World Cup champions, but Copa America champions. This is a team that can be very pragmatic when they need to, and they have very special players in transition, a very special player in Lionel Messi who's going to be playing at home. And when you look at the draw, when you look at the scheduling, when you look at the cities, it's almost cater-made for an Argentina final. It's cater-made for Lionel Messi to play at home in Miami in that final. I think this is theirs. I think we're talking about Argentina that's going to feel very much at home. The Argentine Federation now has their headquarters in Miami. Their star player plays in Miami. They're very much going to be a home team anywhere they go. It's going to be a star attraction. It just seems like the stars are aligning for this team to make a very deep run. And just going back to Brazil, I'm getting vibes from this Brazilian team of last Copa America in the States with Dunga and that pool of players and how they suffered, and Dunga leaves, Tite comes in, and pretty much that same group of players does very special things under Tite, and they lost in a calendar cycle, a World Cup cycle, 4 years, maybe 2 games. So a lot of things could change, as Stevie said, with the new coach.
Argentina, obviously looking at this, we look at them in a different light now since what happened in the World Cup and everything that led up to it, don't we?
Well, absolutely, and rightfully so. And I think Hercules makes the point that while we focus on Lionel Messi, this team gives you the flexibility to do different things on the field because of the personality of the group, that there is a team that defends well, a team that through the midfield can take on a different personality. They can be a passing team, but if you need to get into a fight, this can be a fighting team as well. And then, of course, Lionel Messi gives this group something different. And to the point of Lionel Messi, and I'm going to extend this conversation onto Lionel Scaloni. Following their game against Brazil in the press conference, Lionel Scaloni, on his own, it wasn't a question, it wasn't brought up by anybody else, by a journalist or whatever. He brought it up that even though it was a time for celebration, it almost felt like for him it was a time for reflection, for introspection, almost thinking, I don't know if I can do this any longer with the Argentina national team. And I'm just kind of following the breadcrumbs and following the clues and putting things together. Angel Di Maria, he's already said he's out after Copa America. This is it. This is his last competition with the national team. Lionel Scaloni is coming out and saying, I don't know if I have it in me to continue to push forward with this group and give the best version of myself. So what does Lionel Scaloni know about Lionel Messi that we don't? Right? And that's where I go with this. Does Lionel Scaloni feel like this may just be Lionel Messi's last real significant tournament with the Argentina national team? And does that mean that he doesn't want to be part of the transition that comes, that is going to be a complicated transition, a transition that comes post-Messi? How do you deal with that? How do you accommodate that? So if you follow enough hints and enough clues, it's not far-fetched to come to the conclusion that maybe, even though Messi hasn't addressed it himself directly, that maybe Copa America is his big last tournament.
That's bad news for everybody else. Because if there are 3, 4 and 5 of these guys, which there will be, people like Otamendi as well, can't go on forever. This seems like this is going to be all of their last tournament. That's an even extra push for them to do well. So watch out everybody else.
Watch out everybody else. Venezuela, confident?
Confident of what?
See, we don't need that kind of attitude. We don't need that kind of attitude. I'll tell you what.
I think it's called realism.
Okay, right. But I will say this about Venezuela, and I know we don't want to make this segment about Venezuela, but I will because I am from Venezuela. Here's the thing. If there was ever a time to play against Mexico, it's right now. It's right now. You talk about what we have seen from Mexico in years past and what they are now. This is a team that is vulnerable. Ecuador is a team that matches quite well with Venezuela. It's pretty even. Ecuador probably slightly better than Venezuela, but Ecuador is a team that can beat Mexico as well. So to your point, when you were talking about the United States, it's about getting out of the group. So if you're Venezuela, you don't have to beat everybody, but you just have to beat the teams that you are competitive with. And you're competitive, certainly I think so, with Mexico right now. And I think you can get a result from there. And if you do so, now you find yourself in a situation where that game against Ecuador may just determine you going through or not. And guess what? All you have to do is finish second. You finish second, you're out of the group, and now we're dancing, baby.
Is Sebi a little bit worried, Herc? Is his teeth chattering in this Group B?
You know, oddly enough, Sebi thinks they got a favorable draw. I'm the one who thinks Mexico didn't get that much of a favorable draw. I'm with Ali here. If you were ever any of these other teams and you see a Mexican national team who will certainly be the most followed national team in this competition, will be a home team. If you ever wanted to play against a Mexican national team, it's today with this pool of players. It's today with Jimmy Lozano. It's today with the problems the Federation has. And I think this is probably the most contested group. I don't know about the group of death. That's probably Brazil, Colombia, and Paraguay, and whoever comes in, Costa Rica, Honduras there, just because you got 3 CONMEBOL teams. But certainly, when you look at the rivals, I could see Mexico winning the group, and I could also see Mexico not winning a game. That's how highly contested I think this group is. I am worried for Mexico. Mexico has problems when they face very physical teams that can run them into the ground, especially in that midfield. And I look at Ecuador, who was one of the top 3 youngest teams at the World Cup, and how dangerous they could be. That's a problem. I look at a Venezuela team right now that nobody in South America would want to play or say, yeah, I'll take them on. That could be a problem. I look at a team like Jamaica under Holgrimson, who has changed and has all these dual nationals now that are playing at a very high level. Look what Leon Bailey is in the form of his life, one of the best wingers right now in the Premier League. That could be a problem. I think Mexico didn't get that favorable of a draw.